Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With fishingbooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. Fishingbooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to fishingbooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And right now they still have that winter clearance event going on, 20 to 50% off everything on the site through February 15th. So if you're looking to pick up anything, definitely get over there. Check out that the Grayling hoodie. I can't say enough about it. If I was going to buy 2 things, it would be the Elkins vest and the Grayling hoodie. And that would set you up for 75% of your season. Those are my 2 by far favorite things. So take a look at those 2 if you're going to go pop on over there. Again, huntworthgear.com. And check out that event. You got till February 15th, so you still got some time. And then over at Latitude, they have their outlet back open, some dump pouches, knee pads, profile pockets back in there. They do have their Ranger 22s back in stock in the mossy oak color. And speaking of Latitude, I'm going to be at the Harrisburg show next week, towards the end of the week through the weekend. Gonna be fun. I always enjoy going to that show, hanging out with those guys, and of course Greg Litzinger. He's gonna be there. Just always fun getting to see everybody. So if you're from that side, if you're one of the PA East Coasters, any of that, swing by, stop by, say hi. We're gonna be in the archery hall, and always fun, always a good time. So looking forward to that. Go over, check out our friends at Canati, Zinger, Genesis 3D. I just heard that there's some cool new stuff coming out for Genesis 3D that I hadn't even heard of. So I heard about it last night, and it's something that basically everybody can use. So not necessarily just mobile hunters. So pretty excited to see what iteration Austin's on with that. So keep your eyes peeled with Austin and Genesis 3D. So, this podcast, Aaron Olsen, Next Up Outdoors. If you haven't been following along with him on his YouTube channel, you need to go over there and check it out. From the title of this podcast, you kind of get the idea, but it ends up being like public land etiquette, and this almost is like a Western style public land etiquette, where it's a kind of a spot and stalk deal where 2 people glassed up the same buck who got there first, and it turns out the other guy shot it right out in front of him while they were very apparently watching this deer and figuring out how to make a play. So we kind of talked through all of that, and the video is pretty wild. And if you've watched the video, much like I had, I Monday morning quarterback, hindsight 2020, we all have our ideas of what you should have done, what should have happened. As I like to do, I picked it apart and said, hey, why did you do this? Why didn't you do this? And, I'm not patient. I'm super aggressive in these types of situations. So, we talked through that and kind of where his head was at, what he was thinking. And there's some things that, they didn't necessarily show on the video because you can only show so much, and it's nuanced. And so in the video, it looks like everything's happening in the exact same spot where the stalk actually took place was on, it was in the same, they were glassing from the same knob, but it was from a different little pocket that was much more stalkable. So that's kind of what they were waiting for. And it just so happened that's when this other guy rolls up. So maybe the other guy was on the other side doing the exact same thing. Who knows? But wild story, wild video, and fun conversation. So I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And let us know what you think about this this story. Like, what would you do if you're out there in this situation? We've all had people walk in on us and stuff like that, and that's part of public land hunting. But this, I think, is a whole nother animal. So I'm interested to see like the feedback, what everybody thinks, and listen to it. Let me know. As always, thank you for listening. Enjoy the podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, and I'm here with Mr. Aaron Olsen, and I've had him on the podcast a couple times, met him in person a bunch of times, and I can tell you that I was quite surprised when I was in Kansas and I woke up and he comes crawling out of the tent as we're loading up the truck. So we didn't necessarily share a camp, but it was about as close as you can get. So we're going to talk about that hunt. If you haven't seen his latest video on YouTube, you definitely need to go check it out. I think it's probably big shout out to Dylan for producing it. One of the best ones that you've put out. So on that note, just from the video side of it, but super cool hunt. So how are you doing, Aaron?
Anytime I can talk hunting this time of year when I've been cooped up in the house. I got a 4.5-week-old newborn, so we have not got out a whole lot. So to have a chance to talk hunting is very much welcomed.
Yeah, and that was part of the whole, like, I don't want to say like grind, because it's like, what we live for, but that was part of the whole thing with Kansas is like, we were there like a little bit later in the season. We were there like when it was Michigan gun season and going into like Thanksgiving and all that. And, your wife is pregnant. You're like, these are kind of like my last hunts until the baby comes. I'm kind of running down all my last minutes that I have. So obviously you're doing this full time, so you kind of have to do this, but like, how do you negotiate that with a, 8.5 month pregnant wife?
I'll just say this. She said, never again. I mean, more than likely, if we have another kid, it'll just be one more. But she said, never again will we time it the way we did. Our daughter was born December 30th. From a off-season standpoint, like, that sounds nice to have basically the entire winter and spring and, a lot of time before fall to get acclimated to having two kids. But what you don't see is a very, very pregnant woman trying to chase down a toddler while dad's several states away hunting. For one, she's just awesome. I mean, she knew what she signed up for when we started dating. Even I think we started talking when I was on a rut trip. So like right from the jump, it's like, hey, this is what I do in the fall. I travel, I'm gone. But I just try to make everything as easy on her as possible. So if that means I need to set up, somebody to help watch the kids, I'll have my mom come into town for a few days and, take some of the load, or I just try to, make sure the groceries are stocked, make sure the house is all set up before I take off for these trips. So everything's as low friction as possible, and she can just try to survive while I'm gone. And she does a really great job at it.
Yeah. And I've played that game before too, but I only have the one kid. And so like you said, it's chasing around that toddler at, I can't even imagine, like, yeah, what a saint. And so like for this, like I'm just thinking back, like I think the last time that you were on the podcast after we got done recording, we were kind of talking about Kansas and how we were talking about kind of hunting the same area, kind of going back and forth. And I was asking you about like your decoy that you used and all of that, because I had killed my deer over a decoy when I was in Kansas. And I think, I guess I was behind a decoy, and then you decoyed a lot of deer the last time. And then this time you didn't even basically pick it up.
I had it more than you probably saw in the film, but I don't think I decoyed a single deer. I don't think I called in a single deer. And like when you're on Facebook in November, Instagram, like how many times do you see somebody holding a giant buck and they're like, man, I did a last ditch rattle sequence, and lo and behold, this deer I've never seen before walked out to 15 yards, postured up. Like that never happens. Like I tried rattling so many times, so many different locations, on the ground, crunching the leaves. And I mean, I made a kind of some satire around that in the video, like making a big scene, rattling and whatnot. But yeah, I did not have any, I think there was one buck that we got to have a visual with the decoy, and he came in directly downwind of us, and that we didn't get footage of it. It didn't even make it into the film. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. It's a tool to have, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'd rather have it and, not have the opportunities than not have it and need it, I suppose.
And, obviously we're going to get into it, but I'll just tell the listener. So we were camped right next to each other. And you want to talk about like a tale of two camps, because Aaron is over here like, oh yeah, I saw some deer. Like you watch the video and you're like, holy shit, man. Like these deer are huge and like all this stuff. And, we shot the deer that we shot and we were ecstatic. We had a blast. We did exactly what we came there to do, with the exception of Eric. And, like holding it close to the vest as far as like, we weren't going to come chase you around and follow you and go try and, snipe your deer out from under you or anything. But, you guys were getting up at like 2-3 in the morning, driving a long ways. Like, you had been there before, hunted the, similar areas, like expectation versus reality, not in the outcome, but just in the hunt. Like, how did it go based on like what you had seen before and expected?
Overall, I think my expectations, I think it exceeded my expectations. But I also had lofty expectations. I'd been all around that area, a couple different trips now, different times of the season. I've done one late season. I did one early season, or not early season, one rut. But, we were in them. Like there's no doubt about it. Like I think there was one day that we didn't have a buck encounter, and, whether we were hunting the timber or more open stuff, like we were close. And yeah, we were waking up super early, driving several hours. Basically what had happened is, I'd hunted around where you guys were. So that's where we decided to set up camp and hunt for the first day or two. And then took some flyers, making some long treks out to other areas to check them out. And that's where you'll see in the video, we kind of start doing some more open country stuff and glass up some really impressive bucks. And at that point, by the time you drive several hours back to camp, reload all the camera gear, dump footage, eat somewhere along the way there, it's time to go to bed. And if we were going to go right back to that place in the morning, we were driving several hours back. So there was this constant tension of like, well, do we just pack up camp and find a place closer so we're not driving so far? Because we were eating up our sleep time big time. But we just our confidence was pretty high that we were going to kill relatively efficiently. And so it's like, we'll just suck it up one more day, make the drive out there, and we'll just kill. And then it's like a non-factor. We'll just be back at camp, pack up, and, head home. Well, then we wouldn't kill. So then we'd drive a couple hours back and then do the same thing the next day and the next day and the next day. And all of a sudden we're running on fumes for, I don't know how long we were out there. I think 11 days, something along that timeline, but there was not a lot of sleep to be had.
And so what is your general game plan going out there? Because I want to build on this, because anybody who's watched the videos, and I want to get into, because you had mentioned like there were some interesting comments on the video, and I want to ask you about those and, kind of expound on those, because I have my own things on it. But so what, like your hunting style, watching your videos is, for the most part, a Midwestern style hunting style. You go find the sign, set up, sit in a tree, whatever. And then your other videos when you're in Kansas, you're decoying, kind of spot and stalk. You're looking for these bucks that are locked down with a doe, or, cruising or whatever, and then try to, make a move or get them to notice the decoy. So going into this hunt, like when you, I guess not necessarily this hunt, but when you peeled off and you drove a couple hours away, what was your like game plan? Like, as far as from the video, it doesn't seem like it was to go get in a tree somewhere.
Right. Yeah, it definitely wasn't. It was definitely the goal was to use our glass. The prior trip I'd made out there, did a lot of like road hunting, more driving around, trying to catch a buck out in the open. It's like, it's like if you were to go fishing and take out all the water, it's a lot easier to find the fish that way. So the whole idea was to go where there's a lot less cover, a lot less trees. And while the bucks are up on their feet so much and covering distance, like, can we get eyes on something where either it's a lockdown situation? What I've found is lockdown bucks are very vulnerable. Like, typically they like being in the open where they can see. That way they can fend off bucks that are trying to come in and steal their doe. And they're relatively hard to bump out of an area. And as long as you don't like really, really screw it up, a lot of times they'll be right back in that same area. So we were trying to find something along those lines, or maybe we could even see a buck cruising into a chunk of cover and then, get out of the car and make an aggressive move, running around and try to cut him off. And I had some success doing that in previous trips. Didn't seal the deal, but definitely got close several times. And it's a fun change of pace. Yeah, especially coming from the beginning of November, being back in Ohio, where I'm sitting dark to dark in a tree, and it's just more ambush style hunting. It's kind of fun to get out there and stretch the legs and run around a little bit.
And how many times have you done that? Is it your only opportunity, or your only times that you've done that in Kansas?
I've had some, believe it or not, I've had some really good decoy hunts in Michigan, where I spotted a buck and doe locked down in the middle of a cut soybean field, was able to basically sneak into position, sneak into the bubble, set up a decoy, and I ended up missing the buck. I'm always like, how I would describe my hunting style is a jack of all trades. Like, I'm not one that's gonna I'm not killing my buck in a thermal hub early season, and I'm gonna live or die by that program. Like, I want to be able to be effective in any situation, no matter what the situation calls for. I mean, there's plenty of time. Like, there was times this last year where I was tucking myself on the ground in a ghillie suit and two rows back in the edge of a cornfield, basically hunting a property that has no trees. It was just beans and corn, and had some really good hunts that way. Like, if I need to be in a tree, I'll do that. If I think stalking is the best route, if I think a decoy is the best route, like, I just want to be able to be effective no matter what, and have all the tools necessary to be effective no matter what the situation is.
And so from those hunting styles, like, who do you pull from? Who do you want to emulate, like, in those situations? Where are you taking your cues from?
Who would you guess?
That's where I'm going with this. That's where I'm going with this.
I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I think you can learn something from everybody. I have friends that don't even listen to podcasts because they think everything's already been said and it's out there. But I think you can listen to a lot of people, and all it takes is one idea or one thing that, sparks something in your mind that encourages you to try something different. But Andy May is probably the person I would say, I'm not necessarily trying to emulate him or be like him or anything, but he's somebody that is very versatile, has this long track record of being able to go do whatever needs to be done wherever he ends up going, and gets on a lot of really good deer. But then there are the specialists, the specialists where they have their one program and they run that and very successfully. And I still try to pull things from them and try to implement their system into what I do. But I don't exclusively do that one type of, strategy.
I think it's interesting that you said people don't listen, and it's not because I have a podcast, not at all. To say that like people don't listen to podcasts because they think everything's already been said. For me, having had countless hours of conversations, both on the podcast, off the podcast, in person, all over with, many of these guys, I find myself in the woods getting to a spot where like I'm at an impasse, where I'm like trying to make a decision. And I go to my like Rolodex in my mind of like, I go back to when I had these conversations or these podcasts that I've listened to. And then I say, who's been in this situation, or like, what would they do? Or like, what do I think that they would do, or whatever. And a lot of times it's like, slow down, like don't overthink it, that sort of thing. So I find that interesting to be like, well, it's already been said. Well, you don't not go to practice because the coach just has you run the same drill every single day. He says the same thing. There's a reason that you're doing it repetitiously, right? It's so that it's drilled into your head so that you know it, right?
Yeah, I think the people that, it's a limiting belief, and I think it's going to drastically slow certain people's progression down as a hunter because they're not willing to learn, or their ego is too big to take advice or to take input from somebody else. And I think it's a shame, but at the same time, I can't concern myself what other people are thinking about or worried about. And all I know is I'm going to continue learning and trying to get as dangerous as I can on some of these trips.
So, for people who have not watched this video and they have no idea what we're talking about, and they're like, we'll get to the point, take us into like a cliff notes of the first couple days, and then like kind of like the culmination of the hunt on. I don't think the deer that was killed was the biggest deer, was the one that you guys were looking at. It didn't seem like it in the video. No. But like, walk us through the thought process, the mindset, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so we got out to this area, and the first day basically it's just a really good funnel and set up on the ground. And I have I've had some previous hunts in this area that were really productive, so I had high hopes. But a lot of it kind of comes down to if there's food planted in certain places, like I'm really playing off the bed to feed. And so the first morning, go in, and basically the idea is to set up a decoy in this big funnel. So no matter where deer are passing through here, they might see this buck decoy and come in for a shot. It didn't really happen. It was relatively slow. We ended up glassing out in one of these cut fields really far away, unidentifiable buck. Like, it was a racked buck, but we just couldn't tell how good he was, locked down with the doe. And he was right on the edge of the public and private where the fields meet. So we were sitting there, him and hawing, trying to decide, do we sit here and wait for them to hopefully eventually come back to the cover, or, what are we going to do here? So eventually it got really, really hot that day. It was pretty warm when we first got out there, which was unfortunate because just 3 or 4 days before we got out there, it was like an incredible cold front, and a lot of people that we knew had killed bucks during that time. We ended up driving around, and we were able to see that buck from the road, and he was just, a decent 8-point, but nothing that was super exciting, especially early in the trip. But we did end up right back in that same spot the first night. Just, again, it was one of my best spots I've hunted in the past, so had to give it a fair shot, give it the old college try. And then that night, we went and got groceries, ran into, like when you're out in public and you're wearing camo, we came straight from the woods. You bump into someone else who hunts, and they're like, did you see any, or how'd it go? And this guy made a comment. I can't remember exactly what he said, but basically commenting on how warm it was and how it sucked. And we got talking, and, a couple comments in passing. And then all of a sudden, the next aisle, we ran into him again, asked us where we're hunting. And then we kept bumping into each other throughout this store, and built enough rapport over, these quick exchanges where all of a sudden, come to find out he's a local. He farms in the area, kind of tipped us off to some specific locations and what he thought that we should be doing. Which, it's nothing revolutionary or anything like that different from what we were doing. Some of the areas that he pointed out made sense why they might be better than other areas. So the next morning we decided to, he seemed pretty credible. Let's go in and check it out. And ended up in this tree. Again, we're going in blind to thick timber, and it's thick, scouting our way in the dark, but end up finding a bunch of scrapes and getting into a pretty good funnel. And it's just basically a lot of these small ridges coming together. If the deer had to walk within eyesight, maybe not bow shot, if they were going to be traveling through the area. So we got up in this tree. We were one stick off the ground, two ex-college basketball players up in a tree together. So we stick out like a sore thumb because we're in this really jagged tree or crooked tree and not very high up. But anyways, Dylan, my cameraman, is rustling around opening his Pop-Tarts, and I'm sitting there kind of crabby, dude, come on, be quiet. Anyways, he gets his Pop-Tarts out and he's eating them, and all of a sudden I'm like, there's a buck. I saw a buck. He was rubbing a tree maybe 60, 70 yards away, kind of headed our direction. And I'm like, buck, buck, buck. And he's continuing to eat his Pop-Tart. And I don't think he could hear me. So I might have swore at him, dude, there's a effing buck, And he takes a full Pop-Tart and just pushes the whole thing into his mouth. It was pretty funny. And then the encounter happens, but this buck ends up coming into 30 yards and rubbing, and he was sitting there rubbing for a while, and I'm at full draw, and I didn't have a clear shot. The camera looked like, he had a clear shot where he was positioned on the opposite side of the tree, but I just needed him to take a couple more steps. So eventually he does. I try to stop him. I have a bad habit of not stopping deer and shooting, and then bad outcomes happen, and it's a lesson that I'm going to have to learn the hard way again and again until I finally do it. But anyways, I had a clear shot. I tried stopping him. He didn't stop. So I still shot, but my arrow launched 10 feet to the left, not even close. It wasn't I target panic or, I was too shaky or buck. I'm not exactly sure what happened. I have two theories, and it's too hard to replicate, but it was either there was a twig that was kind of sticking out of my tree, and either the string hit that, and that's not what I think happened. The arrow didn't hit a branch. I'll be clear about that. You could see the trajectory of the arrow right out of the bow is just sideways. What I think happened is my back stabilizer and my bow case got squished all the way down to where it was basically perfectly in line with my bottom limb. And so when I drew back and let go, the bottom limb hit my stabilizer. We walked in the dark, so I didn't catch it. I didn't notice it. I should have inspected my bow, when it got light, and lesson learned. But I'm pretty sure that's what happened. So basically the limb hit my back stabilizer and launched the arrow wonky. And I mean, clean miss, beautiful buck. And especially for like second morning and on a trip like this, I've never really had an easy hunt before in my life. They always end up dragging out to 11, 12, 13, 14 days. And it's awesome when you kill a buck that late in a trip, but it'd be kind of nice every now and then to shoot one earlier in the trip. But spirits were high, continued to, I can't remember if we sat all day that day or not. And we did get down at some point and scout around a little bit and try to find a better place where we thought we could catch more cruising bucks and have more shot opportunities. And so the next morning we went back in there, had an encounter with a 2-year-old, and we're planning to sit all day long. Like, it seemed like a pretty good spot where you could, if you just put in the time, like, you're going to have encounters. But at a certain point, some other hunters walked in on us, and I don't know if they were scouting or what. And then not too far away in a different direction, all of a sudden people were shooting guns, and I don't know what they were doing. I don't think they were squirrel hunting. I think they were just having fun shooting guns in the woods. And it also warmed up to like 70 degrees. So we bailed out of there. And that was the day that I was like, let's try driving a couple hours away. And just, again, if the deer aren't going to be moving a whole lot because it's so hot, let's just go to where there's a lot less trees and try to find some. So that led into where all of a sudden we're glassing in the video. And it was already later in the day. Again, we made a several hour drive and burned a lot of daylight. So we get it to where we can kind of see on this knob and immediately glass up, these bone white antlers in the grass, and the deer are already up on their feet. And I think there was 3 bucks and a hot doe. One of the bucks he was an absolute stud. And then there was another really nice 8-point. He was kind of busted up. And with the limited time we had, and I think there was 5 deer. I can't remember what they all were. I'll have to look at the video again, but to try to like sneak up on 5 alert deer didn't seem like the best move. And again, from my experience with lockdown deer, is they'll be right back into that same area the next day. So our plan was, let's just watch them and see what else we can see from afar. And then the next morning we'll be right back into that spot.
So how far away were you when you were glassing them? Like, what was the distance? Because I see you guys were using a spotting scope and all this other stuff. So it was hard to tell in the video, like, what was the actual distance. It could have been a mile. It could have been, 500 yards.
I want to say those ones, honestly, like, knowing what we know now, and it would have been tough. I mean, again, like, trying to sneak up on an alert whitetail is next to impossible, and especially that many. It'd be different if it was just 1 buck in the doe. That time they were like 500 yards away. So that was probably the closest from where we were glassing that we had deer. And, but a lot of the other times, I mean, anywhere from 600 to 800 yards, like close enough where, I mean, we're definitely going to try to make a move on them, but not so there. We did glass up a couple that were like, more like a mile away, and we would have walked back to the truck and drove around, I think, to try to make a play on some of those deer.
And so because we did a little bit of glassing when we were in Kansas, but we weren't trying to see that far. Everything was kind of pretty much pretty tight. So, you were picking these places to glass from just because it was the best vantage point. And then, so like in this situation, you're thinking that these deer are going to be back there in the morning. You're at this high knob. As you're breaking it down for the next day, like when you're looking at your maps, when you're e-scouting, what are you looking at to make a play for the next day? Because hindsight's 20/20. Everybody's a Monday morning quarterback, but it looked like there was just a lot of watching these deer, like the next day, or as we led up to it, and so I'm just trying to figure out, like, what were you guys looking at as far as like terrain when you were looking at the maps and making a plan for the next day, like from day 1 to day 2. What was going through your mind? What was the plan?
I don't know that there was much as far as scouting and trying to it's hard to plan an exact route because we didn't know where the deer were going to be the next day. Like we had an idea. I was hoping they would be back in the same general area, but it's one of those things that like until the deer's bedded here and the wind's doing this, you can kind of make a play in real time. But what I was talking to, I have friends that do a lot of this kind of stuff, and they're like whitetail adrenaline style hunting. They do a lot of this, and they spend a lot of time. They're very, very patient, and then when they go in, it's more times than not they're killing deer. So I'm picking these guys' brains, and they're basically saying that their favorite time, like they'll glass in the morning. And what would happen, and I'll get back on like the exact days, but we would see these deer up on their feet in the morning, like you would typically see, a lot of activity first thing in the morning. But what would happen is, if there was a buck and a doe, they would bed down, but then they would be up on their feet chasing again in no time. And they cover so much ground so fast. Or another buck, because again, they're still on their morning, activity. Another buck would cruise in there, blow things up, and then all of a sudden there's deer running all over. But what these guys told me is, their favorite time is to wait until about lunchtime, because it seems like those deer, they bed down for the day. Like they're more than likely going to stay there. They might get up and chase a little bit, but a lot of the big, a lot of the activity is slowed way down. So more than likely, like they're locked into that area for the rest of the day, giving you all afternoon to make a strategic play and get in there and hopefully get an arrow in one. So there was definitely, does that answer your question? And then I can kind of give some more context that'll illustrate that better.
Yeah, because when we get into it, like as the whole thing culminates, we'll debrief.
Yeah. So the next day we went in, and I think I'm not a weather expert, but I think between the cold temps at night and then how warm it was getting during the day, that temperature shift was causing, like the morning was like milky fog, like you could not see at all. And we had the wind in our favor, and the wind was going to be good until like late morning, and then it was going to do like a 180 shift and be blowing right back to where the deer were bedding. So our plan was to go in there. We didn't know it was going to be that foggy until we got there. So we get up there and we get like little occasional breaks in the fog, and this wasn't quite illustrated that well in the video. So a lot of people, there was comments like, you guys should have got a lot more aggressive on day 2. It's like, that would have been great, but we'd see deer and then there would just be a blanket of fog. And then again, there was a complete wind shift, 180 degrees. So to try to, and again, I'm sure there's a million different ways to do this. And in hindsight, there are definitely things we could have done that we did later in the trip. But my whole goal with all of this was to basically find a buck I want to kill, bedded down, and maintain a visual as much as possible while I'm making my approach. Because what I've found happens is if you just like have an idea, I mean, it happened later in the trip where you're stalking, maybe you have a reference point of a bush or a tree and you say like, he's bedded right under that tree, but you can't actually see the deer and you lose sight of that through your approach. And sometimes like you could do an all day stalk to try to get into position. And then you make it up to that tree, but the buck is not even in there. He got up and chased a doe elsewhere. Another buck came in that you didn't see and blew the whole thing up. And you basically just wasted a whole day crawling in the grass and for nothing. So I wanted to have a visual advantage as long as I possibly could, or as much of the percentage of the stalk as possible. So I didn't want to give up my elevated position and try to come in from a different direction. So when the wind was going to shift later in the day, I don't know that we had a great play that afternoon. I think our plan was just to go elsewhere and try to get on deer.
Okay. And then, so you say, okay, we're going to leave those deer. And, this is something that, you could say bit me or whatever, I shot the deer that I did, but we had all those deer, but I was impatient. Like that's one thing that I, in going back on our hunts and talking to other people that were there, and because there was a bunch of people, Josh Talker, DJ Riley, you, we were all in Kansas, at the same time, and that was the question that I was asking everyone, is like about like being patient or whatever, and the question that, like, I don't want to say like it eats at me or whatever, but like the thing that I lack is patience. Like, I want in the situation like you're in, like that's what I want. I want to be able to see the deer. I don't want to be waiting around for just hoping that something's going to come. I would like to just find a deer, go try to make a play or, figure something out, know that there's one in there, and then if it blows up, go find another one. So you said that there in the video, you can see that there's probably 3 deer that you would kill basically. When it all comes down to it, there's the adage, and this is what, Joe was saying, like, well, why are we leaving deer to find deer? Like, don't leave deer to find deer. Like, why were you doing that?
Yeah.
Again, and you're looking for a specific caliber of deer, and you've got 3 of them right there.
Yeah. A lot of it, I think, just came down to the conditions and everything. Yeah. Like, looking back in retrospect, like, I stand by most of the decisions that I made in all of this. And again, despite the comments on YouTube where everybody watched an edited video and, condensed 2 weeks into an hour and think they know what was the best move, and a lot of those people probably like hunt out of ladder stands and ride their 4-wheeler right to their tree. But it just, again, like, visibility was 0 that morning. So even, like, what are you going to do how are you going to spot and stalk if there's milky fog? There's nothing you can really do about it. So the only other option would be to come in from a different direction on the ground with no clue of where these deer are. And at that point, like, you're wasting your time, in my opinion. So I think we ended up just driving out of the fog completely and just trying to, again, try to see if we could find another location where there was a buck with lockdown with the doe in a favorable area. And we did some of that. We did some scouting. We did some rattling sequences in different areas that I've had good encounters in the past. Nothing productive happened. And then finally, like, the conditions got better. The wind shifted back for us to get back on that glassing knob with like an hour of light left in the day. And I think we decided to do that to basically, like, let's just continue to, like, monitor, like, make sure, like, what we think is happening is actually happening. And, like, as long as we can keep tabs on this deer, it's just it's not a matter of if we're going to kill one, it's a matter of when. So we get back up on there. We're able to relocate, I don't remember, more than 1 buck, at least 1 buck. So we were like, confirm that this area is going to continue to be productive, at least for this time period. But then ended up bailing out of there. So like the next day, like, conditions were going to be perfect. We were going to have more wind in our favor, no fog, like everything was lining up to, and now we have like multiple data points of like seeing where these deer are traveling, how they're traveling through there. And our confidence was really high going into what would be, I think it'd be day 5 of the trip, but day 3 of kind of being in this more open terrain.
So in this scenario with these deer, like day 2, you were like kind of screwed by the fog, and I'm aware of the fog. I mean, like, I can, the day after, like, I had that big one at full draw, we went back in there, and that whole field that you couldn't even see across it. It was, 200 yards across, and you couldn't see across it. So I couldn't imagine trying to see any further than that. But were you in there at all? I guess day 3, did you show up there in the dark to glass when the sun came up? Because one of my questions would be, like, watching the video again, and I love asking questions that are hard questions because it like judging your body language. It's like, it seems like you're like, like I'm not busting your balls. Like I'm just trying to like ask the questions. Right. So this is not an indictment. But I'm just wondering, like, cause I try to think of like after a hunt or like after a day, like after I get done, like, we're automatically like breaking down like, okay, these deer were here. I think they're coming here. If they do the same thing tomorrow, where can we enter from? Where can we be like to intercept them? And if they're in the same spot every morning, and then watching the video, obviously you could have watched your footage back, but you don't have like, you don't get to see day 3, 4, 5. You don't get to see all of what transpires. Right. But it looks like there's some terrain down there. It looks like there's some places to hide. So, you don't really know where those deer are at night coming back into bed. We always, if it was bed to food, kind of all bets are off here at this time of year. But I just didn't know if you ever saw them like coming back to there, or if they just stayed around that same area all night. Because it would seem like if they're heading back in there, like, maybe an option. Was it ever an option to just get down in there and wait for them in the morning?
Yeah, I think it could definitely work for sure. Part of it is the, what would you rather do? Sit and hope, or know exactly where they are and go right to them? So it was like, hey, we have the conditions to be able to actually spot and stalk versus give up the majority of our visual advantage, be down there, and maybe we'd get lucky, but it would be more of get lucky and not necessarily like be able to see exactly where they were. And then the other part of that is like, what kind of hunt do you want to have? Like, I was out there to, when I have opportunities to do different things, like I like to explore that. So, I didn't want to just go run the same play I'd be running in Ohio and go get in a tree. Again, I think if we would have just got down there and sat all day for that whole time, like we would have had opportunities as well. But I think given the circumstances, like we were having fun doing what we were doing.
Oh yeah. And I wasn't necessarily saying get in a tree. I was just saying just to kind of get closer, just hide and see if you could figure out where they were coming back through there. Cause like, where everything kind of like came to a head, like at the end of the story, it seems like there was a little bit of a higher point in there. There was a little bit of a place where it seemed like if you got kind of down in there where you could kind of maybe see a little bit in a couple of different directions where, from the ground, it could get real exciting. And you obviously were able to move around a little bit. So I'm just wondering, and now obviously, in hindsight, I'm just wondering if you ever considered that as an option, not go down there and, get up a tree, but just either get close or find something. And I understand, like, I don't have the, all the information, right, to be able to say, well, if I would have went down there, I wouldn't have been able to see anything or whatever. I don't know how tall the grass was or whatever,
Yeah, it definitely, it's definitely, we did some of that. Again, not really like super well illustrated in the video, because you got to like pick and choose like what you're putting.
Oh, absolutely.
We only put the most action packed stuff in there, so there's plenty of slower times that it wasn't all just bucks all day long. Part of it was we were seeing deer, but it's not like they were always in the same exact place. So like, the first time we glassed them up, they were bedded over here. The next time we glassed them up, the next day they'd be over here. So to say like, we did definitely pick out spots on the map where we're like, hey, if we think we could just be right there, like seems like more deer are walking by that area than other areas. And there was other opportunity or other times where we did that later, but we're still like, we've only been up here for like one evening, a partial morning that got fogged out, and then like the end of the day. So like, I'm still at this point, I'm still very confident that like all it's going to take is us putting a buck to bed in the morning and having all day to stalk him. And I think we can kill him. So that was like where our head was at on day 3. And that's basically what happened. So we ended up And again, all these things are just abbreviated and condensed. So we ended up glassing up this 10 point with a hot doe. And this one was a little bit different because they basically went into like a small patch of cover that's like, I don't know, an acre maybe. But we couldn't see exactly where they were bedding. But we watched them all morning, and they'd go bombing out of there, and they'd chase like a half mile away and then chase right back into it. They're like rockets in and out of the cover, which again is why it's not like the second we see a deer, we're running down after them. But eventually it was evident that they were going to bed up in this little pocket of cover for the day. And we'd see them up milling around, and then they lay back down, and they'd get up and then they'd lay back down. So again, around midday, we're like, all right, here's our opportunity. We made our approach in there. And I guess to sort of address, like, could you just get down there and see what happens? Like, from up on a glassing knob, I'm sure you could probably relate this, even like if you're up in a tree somewhere and looking down at the deer in a whatever brushy field or something. Like, everything looks really flat when you're up high, and then when you get down into it and you realize the brush is as tall as you are and everything else, it makes it a whole lot, like, there's a lot more terrain when you actually get into the mix, which made it great for sneaking around, but kind of difficult. Again, you just lose your visual advantage that way. But we basically execute our stalk perfectly. We take our boots off, which, like, as a whitetail hunter, like oh, we're getting close enough where we're taking our boots off and like sneaking around in socks. Like, this is exciting. And basically there was like a 5-strand of barbed wire fence and then this pocket of cover. And we were debating, like, what do we do? Do we try to like set up a decoy and try to call him out of here? And from what I've experienced, like, you have to pose an actual threat to the buck. Like, for a decoy to be effective and calling to be really effective, a buck is not going to leave his hot doe to go walk 200 yards at a potential threat. Like, you have to be in his bubble and him to think you're actually, there's an opportunity for him, this other buck, to come in and steal your doe or to steal his doe for him to do anything about it. So I was like, we got to get on the other side of this fence. I don't think we're close enough if we try to call him. And also, I didn't know how we would call him through the fence, over the fence, under the fence. Let's just get through this fence. And it wasn't that windy, but we both managed to get through. And what bit us on this one, and again, like, you can't see a lot of this in the video because we're trying not to get busted, so there's limited video of some of these parts. But we get through the fence. I'm sneaking up. I basically wanted to get to the point of this cover so I could stake the decoy in and hit the grunt tube, and hopefully this buck would be able to have a direct line of sight to the decoy from where I wanted to get to, and he would come marching in. Because the other thing that I've learned, and you see it in a lot of different people's videos, but decoys it's like a cheat code. If you can get close enough and get a direct line of sight to these bucks, like, they just black out and they just come right in. But what happened is we didn't realize there was a doe fawn in this pocket of cover too that we were unaware of. And that's the hard part about not having a visual advantage and not being able to know exactly where these deer are bedding. So we basically got into the cover. I look, and this doe fawn is staring directly at us. So I put the profile decoy out in front of us to try to hide us a little bit. And we're squatting, and we're 34-year-old washed up basketball players. So our knees are aching, and we're in like the most awkward positions. And it was like a 10-minute stare down. And she'd go back to feeding for a second. Then she'd get curious again. Then she started coming closer and closer and closer. And she just would not give it up. And eventually, if she hung around long enough, she was going to bust us. Like, there's no doubt about it, even like a younger doe. So I decided to try to grunt at her, thinking maybe like spook her without spooking, like, get her to move off more or less. So I grunted, and it worked. She kind of walked off through the other side of the cover where we no longer were in a direct line of sight with her. So at that point, I'd already made my presence aware because I'd grunted. So we kind of hurried up to the edge of this cover. I put my decoy in. We kind of get in position to where, again, I'm hoping that this buck's gonna stand up and march right to the decoy. So I grunt again. The buck grunts back. So I make a grunt sequence, and I just hear, and I'm fired up. I'm like, this buck is coming. Like, he responded. He's right where I thought he was going to be. He could probably see the decoy at this point if he isn't already standing up. And And then all of a sudden, we're not sure if it was the doe or the doe fawn, but eventually one of them blew. So they all ran out of there and the buck went after. So like busted stalk. So that was day 3 up there. So like we tried to get aggressive. We just, the issues we ran into is not having that direct visual. So that night we ended up doing kind of what you were alluding to, is just like getting on the ground in there and just like seeing what happens. And we didn't end up getting into anything else. But again, the next day, conditions were going to...
So right there, like, what does that do for, like, where are you at with morale, right? Because
tired.
This is, well, but, you know, long drives, you know, all the stuff that's going on at home, you know, bow malfunctions, at some point between there or here, you had already lost a 360. You had to go back and get it. Like all the things that go into, you know, a long hunt like this, getting close. You know, there's that adrenaline where like it's gonna work. And I mean, I can tell you, like when it happened with Joe and I, is like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Like we were so close, but then at the same time, it's like the high, low, and that was at our beginning, not like grinding it out for so long. So, you know, where are you guys at mentally?
Tired, definitely, because we're running on no sleep. I think it's easy for me to stay engaged when I am in the game. Where I struggle is when I'm just like not even getting on bucks. But at this point, I'm still confident. Like that was one buck. I'm still betting that he'll be right back into that same area the next day, as long as, I think that was day 2 of him with that hot doe. Usually I think it's like 2 or 3 days there with the doe. And again, it's pretty hard to bust him out of an area. So I'm still confident that the next day he'll be back in there, or another buck or multiple bucks will be in that area. Definitely like a bummer, but again, we're in the game. We're not just like, it'd be different if we were sitting in the timber and not seeing deer or not seeing shooter bucks and not having opportunities. Like we're seeing them, and that definitely helps keep the drive, because like we know they're there. It's not a matter of, you know, just sitting and hoping. It's a matter of like, one of these chances is it's gonna come to fruition if we just stick with it.
So, you know, what happens when everybody says, I guess, quote unquote, everybody, right? You know, these deer, when they're locked down, you bust them out of there, they're going to come right back there. And, you know, again, like they bet in a spot for a certain reason. Their betting worked. You know, you might have been a coyote. They don't know what you are. You know, it doesn't really matter. So what's your plan going into the next day?
Right back to glassing. Again, everything just came down to having, like, we had to get up there and see if there was bucks in the area. And, you know, there was a couple different places we were glassing from, but like we were trying to canvas as wide of an area as possible. And so that was the play, is to get back up there. And so then we did that. And every day we're doing this. Like my goal is to be the first one. There's one place to park at this particular area. My goal is to be parked there before anyone else could. And, you know, so we were getting in early, getting in the dark. So that way, as soon as daylight's breaking, like we're glassing. And, the days run together, but we ended up glassing that same buck up in the same general area. And this time we were sure to make sure that there was not a doe fawn with them. So we're watching them chase. We're watching all the, you know, we're trying to just keep tabs on all of the deer, which is why we wanted that visual advantage so bad, versus just like taking a flyer, setting up on the ground where we thought they might end up. So we end up seeing them in there. And for the first part of the morning, this buck and doe are back in that chunk of cover again, where we don't have a great visual. We just know that they're in the cover. We can see more or less all directions around it. So we know that we can see when they run out of there and run back in. So there were some other bucks that had, you know, came in, checked it out. They run around for a little bit, and then that buck wanders off, and then the one buck and doe end up back in that spot. So that was kind of what happened in the beginning part of the morning. And eventually, so we're sitting here trying to, again, plan out like, all right, our stalk, what are we going to do differently than we did last time? We know that there's not another deer in here at least, so it's just the buck and doe we got to worry about. And at some point, as we're debating this, and again, we're not in a rush, like going back to what my much more experienced friends say, like they'd rather wait till more midday when these deer are like they're bedded down for the long haul, unless obviously they're going to get up and things happen. But at some point late morning, they run out of there and they end up going into a different area that is much better for stalking. We have direct line of sight to where they're bedding, and they're still up and down, but we can see them there, and we're just waiting for them to bed down for the day. But like way better stalking route, way better line of sight. We can see exactly where the doe's bedding, right where the buck is bedding, like best case scenario. And while we're seeing that, all of a sudden we see this truck drive by and kind of slow roll. And Dylan was like, I wonder if they're looking at the buck. And I'm like, there's no way. And sure enough, they stop, and I can't remember if they had a spotting scope or binoculars, but they're looking at the deer from the road, which is a ways away, but it's open country. So, I mean, that's what a lot of people do is drive around. But we're also two guys on top of a hill that is all short, dead grass. So, like, I can see miles. You could also see us from miles away. Like, we're not that hidden. And I'm glassing them, and I was fairly certain they were looking at me up on the hill, like, oh, well, there's these hunters, there's this buck. These hunters are obviously up there watching this buck. So that truck leaves. We're continuing again just to watch these deer and, trying to keep tabs on them and trying to pay special attention to where the doe is bedding too. Because what we didn't want to do is go stalking in there, not know where the doe is, but know where the buck was, bump the doe, and then the jig's up anyways. You got to know where both of them are. So time's passing. We're waiting for them to, again, like just bed down for the day. And we see that truck again, and they stop. And again, like they're clearly glassing. And then truck disappears out of sight. So as we continue to watch, I look over, and on the same hill that we're on, all of a sudden I see another hunter. And like I'm immediately frustrated. Like it's public land. It is a large area, but in my mind, it's like our truck's parked right there where a hunter would have had to come in. We're up on this obvious place where anybody with binoculars would be able to see us, and he's clearly looking at the same deer. Like we're looking at the same thing here. So we kind of both stand up to make ourselves even more obvious. Like, hey, there's two guys here already. Like, please just like. I haven't been in that situation. I mean, that's the first time I've ever been in that scenario, but like what, and I'm curious to know what you think and what other people think. And the comments have been kind of all over the place. And again, this whole thing wasn't spelled out in detail. So like some of the comments are one way and some are the other, but like, I don't know what the proper etiquette would be in that situation. But like in my mind, it's like, we were there, we're clearly there watching that deer. Our truck's parked right there, like we're in there, and all of a sudden somebody's coming in, and they're glassing, and I'm looking at them, and I'm fairly certain they're looking at me, and time's passing. Again, we're still waiting for this buck to bed down. Like they're still kind of up and moseying around, and we're trying to like pinpoint exactly where they're going to bed. So we're watching him, we're watching the buck, and this guy seems like he's going to start going, and then he'd sit down on the side of the hill, and I'm like, I think no matter what, we gotta go now. We gotta start getting in there. So we pack up and we head in there. And I mean, I kind of assumed that guy was also going to try to make a play. Again, I'm frustrated this entire time, but we go running down this hill and make our approach, and really rushed a lot of our decision making because we're just trying to get in there, right? And where we would have taken probably like several hours to make this approach and be super calculated and looking at specific terrain features or bushes and saying, okay, that's the one he was bedded next to, right? So we kind of like just forced our way, rushed in there, and then we're trying to decide like, okay, what you're looking from up top is a lot different when you're actually down on the ground. So we're trying to make sure the tree that we're looking at is the one that we were looking at from up there. And so we're trying to figure all this out, and all of a sudden we ended up jumping this buck. He stands up out of his bed, and I didn't know this at the time. I didn't realize it. Like, it all happened so fast. But the other hunter shot at that point, which again, I didn't see this in real time. But an arrow goes flying over this buck's back. You see it in the video. And then the buck runs straight away from me and stops and looks, because we're like crawling around on the ground. It's not like we're really obvious and, you know, just flat out spook him. He just like probably heard rustling and whatever. So he ran, you know, maybe 40 yards and stopped. And he's probably at, I don't know, I think he was at 70 yards when he stopped. Like, I'm not going to shoot that far. But he's just standing there. And then all of a sudden he takes off. So the other hunter turns around and looks at me, and I'm like, you know, what the heck just happened? And he looked at me and kind of like shrugged, and the buck stopped and kind of circled around where the other hunter was. And he's looking at me, and, you know, like at this point, like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I don't know what kind of, like, we're both probably pissed at each other. And through this whole time, I'm trying to like put myself in this guy's shoes. Like, maybe he didn't know we were there somehow, despite the truck and the guys and everything. Like, maybe he didn't know. You know, I don't know. So like, maybe he thinks we just rushed in on his spot that he's been, like, I don't know. I'm frustrated though. Again, you can't claim a deer or anything like that. It's 100% public land. So like, nobody come after me for that. I'm not saying, despite my clickbait thumbnail and title for the video where it said this guy shot my buck, which I just gave away what happens. But that I never thought that was like my buck or anything. I did think it was like, again, courtesy, maybe that this other hunter shouldn't have came in there. But again, I don't know all the context. Maybe he had no clue we were there and like whatever. But anyway, he's standing up looking at me, and I'm like pointing like, dude, the buck is right there still, like within bow range of you. And he's still looking at me, and I'm like, dude, turn around. So finally he turns around and kind of ducks back into his bush, and the buck is like starting to try to circle downwind to his position. And we're filming this whole thing. And all of a sudden we're watching the buck, arrow goes flying out, the buck mule kicks, and he just takes off. And the other hunter came up to us, and, you know, he was like, you could tell he was just like out of his mind. He was like, oh my gosh, you know, like obviously huge adrenaline dump this entire thing. But again, up to the point where he shot the buck, like, I didn't know if we were about to have a altercation or some type of like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm trying to like be positive about everything. And despite my frustration, like I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying not to be a jerk here. So, and again, if I never pointed and told him to turn around, like, he would never have shot that deer. So like, you know, I congratulated him, and, you know, we talked and stuff, and he asked what our YouTube channel was. He must've just assumed because we had cameras and stuff. And, you know, you can see how that whole thing plays out. Ended up being like nice guy. We helped him track and took some nice pictures for him to send after. And like, we've stayed in touch even still, but like, it was definitely a kick in the nuts, because I do think like that was our best case stalking situation as far as like having the visual advantage, having the wind, and everything else was in our favor. I think there was a pretty good chance we could have eventually at least got a chance at them, and who knows, maybe another buck would have ran in there and blew it up by the time we got in. So nothing's obviously for sure. But to basically have another hunter shoot the same buck that I just stalked into bow range of, while I'm like 20 yards from this other hunter, was like so bizarre. It was like the most wild thing I've ever experienced. So yeah, that was day 6.
So you held it together really well. And like of the comments that I read where it said you handled the one that I, you know, took note of, it said you handled that way better than I would have. And I thought, yeah, that's definitely true. You know, I feel like if you've ever hunted public land, and I've had it happen out of state, I've had it happen in state, you know, everybody has had somebody walk in on them. And I feel like everybody has had someone walk in on them and think that it was their spot, or you're messing them up, or had some sort of like, but I think this is like an entirely different situation. And I think The guys that probably have the most experience with this would be like an elk hunter or a mule deer hunter, the Western guys. So that's where you would get, your actual. So any whitetail hunter has anything to say about this, I would take with a grain of salt, I think. And not to say that it's, right or wrong. I think it's probably, if he did, you always think that like they had to have seen you, had to do this stuff, bad form. But you give them, I guess, the benefit of the doubt. But if you look in the video, the guy, the first thing that he says is, "I'm sorry." He doesn't say like, "I didn't know you were in here." Yeah,
he was very apologetic, and somebody even commented like, "Why is he apologizing? It's not like your name was written on the deer." So I don't know. Part of me thinks that it was like, "Hey, I know you're in there. I see the buck though, and I think I can get to him." Which again, that's a fair game. Like again, it's not my spot; it's public land, and like I was genuinely happy for him. Like I was, again, irritated that the opportunity kind of got messed up for me, but like I was genuinely happy for the guy. Again, we took like beautiful grip and grins to send to him and stuff. But he was very apologetic. And then after we offered to help pack him out, and he basically was like, "Hey, I'm going to wait for my family to get up." He had his family out there, which is cool that he had a bunch of people out there with him. He said they're going to help pack him out and take pictures and stuff. And then when we passed him again, because we had to go back and remember we shed our boots. At some point we had shed our packs, and we had a whole trail of gear from our whole stock along the way. So we had to go get all of our stuff and then hike out. And somewhere along the way we passed him again, and he was like, "Oh, that's your truck right there?" Like, "Yep." And I wasn't looking at him. Like I just wasn't looking at him. Dylan, who was with me, said the look on his face was like, "Oh man, like I screwed up," or not I screwed up, but like, "Wow, this looks bad," or I don't know what emotion or feeling. But again, I mean, he beat me to the buck, made a beautiful shot on him, and I mean, I think there's no doubt if I didn't jump the buck, he probably would have stood up on his own at some point, and he would have ranged him and killed him. So from that standpoint, like, I mean, good for him. And a lot of the other comments in the video were like, "Oh, you should have been more aggressive earlier, day 2 or day 3 or whatever." But what a lot of these keyboard warriors miss is like, yeah, that guy, one of the comments, and a lot of people are liking the comment, somebody commented something to the effect of, "Well, that guy just figured out how to get in there and not sit there and watch him for a bunch of days," which is true. But what also they are missing is like that guy also happened to locate this deer when he was in the most optimal stalkable location. It's not for lack of trying on our part or lack of, aggression. And maybe we could have been more aggressive for sure, but that was definitely the best potential area to stalk him in, like the highest odds stalk.
Yeah, I would say like laying it out here like long form and not, having to squeeze it all into, the video for that. Like the one thing that is not articulated via with a text bubble or something on the screen is because all of the shots are from like through a phone scope or through a spotting scope or whatever, the viewer doesn't know that those deer are in a different spot.
Mm-hmm.
So, we, as a viewer, you think it's all in the same area. So it doesn't say like the deer moved to a different drainage that's more shootable. So that's where the basis of my questions come from, because it's like, so it seems like it's all in the same, that the deer were in the same area. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably why you're getting what you're getting.
Definitely. Yeah, that was my first time ever trying to like really film through a spotting scope and stuff. And it was kind of fun, but yeah, it's also like I'm trying to evaluate deer on a 2-inch phone screen, and like I don't know, some of the numbers I was throwing, like that guy told me what that buck scored, and it wasn't nearly as high as I had guessed him to be, and I think he had also estimated him higher, which I think a lot of people probably overestimate the bucks. So yeah, it definitely it was quite the, and at that point too, I had left I called them cups of coffee, but I had like caffeine pills that I would like, take occasionally throughout the morning. And I threw that out thinking it was trash in my backpack. So between day 6 of the trip, running on like 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and then I went through that whole entire experience on like 0 caffeine, I was like hurting bad. So we were just like delirious. Like some of the conversations, some of the interviews we had were pretty funny because we were just like in another world. But that night we ended up driving all the way back and back to camp, which again, several hours with enough time to get in a tree for that night, and ended up having an awesome encounter with another like beautiful 10-point that night, and just like ran out of time, like just right at the end of shooting light. And he stood there for a few minutes, like backlit on against the lake, and just didn't have a shot or anything. And then it just got past shooting light. And but again, it's like, man, we're just like tripping into bucks. And so again, bummer, but like we're still confident that at some point we're gonna kill here.
So in hindsight, like all the keyboard warriors, everybody looking at it from afar, and you were there, you have the beauty of all of the information, but now you can look back on it and say, okay, I have all the information. I know what's going to happen. At what point in the hunt would you have done something differently?
I don't know that I would have, to be honest. Like, again, for every comment that's on these videos, like, and maybe it's like a little bit of ego, but like, it's not like we're just making rash decisions. Like, I'm making the best decision, again, with the information I have up to that point, but you're saying now that I have all of the information.
Yes. So you know how it ends the way that you did it.
Yeah.
Rationally.
So if I was to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, like, I mean, now I have more reps, kind of learning how deer are using specific area. I probably would I think I found some different ways where you could basically be both in a rut funnel situation, but also have some sort of visual advantage, like kind of what you were alluding to earlier. I do think that would probably be the best bet, and maybe you wouldn't have nearly the visual advantages you would have if you were up top, but you also might catch cruising bucks. And I think this isn't specific to that area. Like, I think just anywhere, like even if you're going on a September opener Kentucky hunt, like glassing can be a super effective strategy, and a lot of the best deer hunters that I know utilize glassing. They want to be able to basically find a buck they want to kill before they try to, before they actually just like go in there and screw things up. But I think in all of these situations, like if you can find an opportunity where you can do basically an observation hunt or be able to glass, but also be in the game, I think is like best case scenario. So I think I would have sought out more opportunities like that. And I don't know, without giving too much information away, like I think that's definitely possible, where you might catch cruising bucks going by, or might just be in the mix enough to get a chance at something, but still also be able to see quite a long distance and be able to make a stalk if necessary.
Yeah.
Or we could have just stuck to the timber stuff that we were also getting in shooter bucks and not driving and burning up all of our sleep time. Like, I think if we would have, it's one of those things, like, we probably would have been better off sticking to one or the other, but we were we were chasing a thrill and hunting the deer we want, hunting deer the way we wanted to hunt them while we were out there. So, no right or wrong answer really.
Yeah. And circling back, because I had asked you and I said, hey, I want to get to that, is like, when I said like, who are you trying to emulate or like whatever. And like, with a very analytical approach, Andy May, of course, makes sense. But like in these types of situations, you keep saying, okay, all my buddies that hunt this whitetail adrenaline style, but I don't think I've ever seen a whitetail adrenaline video where they sit and watch a deer for a few days. They're in there, they bust them, whatever, like, or they'll find another one, and I think about like the same thing with like the hunting public, and they're more reserved. They're still aggressive, but they're less aggressive than say whitetail adrenaline, where they'll glass them, just like you're saying. They'll watch them, and then they'll kind of like make a move, try to see if they can get closer, and then then they'll try to go in there in the evening to get them to come back. They'll try and crawl in there. They'll try and do whatever. But that's kind of what I was like trying to figure out, because like for me, there's no way in hell that I would ever think in a million years that I would just be able to go and kill 2 deer off the ground anywhere in the country. And then you go to Kansas and it's like the deer are, different. And to be like, I don't know, I feel like I personally, I think that you are not giving yourself enough credit, that you gave those deer way too much credit in that situation. And the fact that there was that many deer right there, like what you could have busted them all out of there and hung out there, and one of them would have been back. One of those, maybe not that big one, but one of those subordinate ones would have come back there. And that's just my personal opinion from seeing what was happening there and like the way that you hunt and like your tactics and stuff like that. So I think you didn't give yourself enough credit. I think you were too cautious, not trying to screw it up,
Yeah, no, definitely. That definitely could be the case. And either that or I gave myself too much credit and was just so overly confident in my ability to stalk and kill one if we were able to bed one. Which was kind of the case. Like I was like, if we can bed one, like we're going to kill it. And we just, again, the one chance where we had one bed in visual is the one the other guy killed. So, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, it was fun though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll say, hopefully, when is that you don't get that opportunity again to, go head to head with somebody on a deer. But it's funny because I did another podcast last night, and he had said that he thinks it was Alex Chop that said it, but it's something that really resonated with him, was the fact that we can do everything that we want to try to make all of the right decisions and put ourselves in the best position possible, but we never really know why things happen. Like there's always like an amount of luck. Like we may think that we were there because of the right wind, because of everything, but it may have been another hunter or a coyote, or something may have got this deer up early. We think it's the moon and we think it's all of these things. And yes, we're putting ourselves with the best odds. But like in this scenario, like it took another hunter to get you to run down there, and you were, we'll say millimeters away from killing that deer. And the inverse is also true. Like if you weren't there, who knows if that guy would have blown the stalk. So it's, we can second guess ourselves all the time, but if we don't try, and I think that that's what's more important, for the listener, right? Is like, we can second guess ourselves to death, and we can be the keyboard warrior and say, you should have done this and you should have done this, and this guy did that and he's better than you are. But if you're not out there trying it, You have to go through these failures. You have to be out there doing it to grow, to learn, to be better. And you got to put yourself in those situations. But we don't ever really know like why it happened. Like why one day this is the best rut funnel in the world, exact same conditions, and tomorrow, like, nope, nothing, you know?
Yeah. One thing you said that stuck out is just like you have to go through these failures in order to grow as a hunter. And me and my friends, we have a friendly debate, like who's the best hunter. And, you know, the friends that have the family farm and hunt the same property every season their whole life, like they think that those kind of people could be the best hunters. And then there's me and the other guys that travel and do public land and stuff. And I think the best hunter is whoever is the most adaptable and, you know, basically like on neutral ground anywhere in the country in any situation, like they're probably going to be the one out of the group that kills the better buck. But I've gone through, I mean, I don't know how long I've been doing these out of state trips, and a lot of them are unsuccessful. I've killed I've definitely killed bucks on these trips. And again, they're usually like towards the end of the trips. But eventually the culmination of all these different experiences and failures and intentionally putting myself in these different situations where I'm stalking or I'm trying to, you know, chase one down with a decoy or I'm, you know, in a rut funnel or whatever the case might be, like eventually I'm going to have such a catalog of experiences to draw from. And you're right. There's always luck is always a huge factor. Like there's no doubt about it. All we can do is put the odds in our favor the best we can and hope that the last bit just comes to fruition. But I definitely think that you can kind of stack the odds and put yourself in more favorable positions over, you know, especially if you can put yourself in higher odds situations, even just slightly higher odds over a long period of time over the course of an entire season, like you're no doubt going to get more opportunities. And a lot of that I think does come from like being aggressive or being kind of unorthodox and trying things. Like if you hunt like everyone else is hunting, like you're going to get the results everyone else is getting. And that's been one of the toughest things for me to break, is trying to like break out of the traditional style of hunting, especially public land. Like if you're seeing if you're trying to hunt the way everyone else is, like probably not going to get it done, because if you could kill them like everyone is trying to do, everybody would be killing big deer.
So going forward, and having learned these lessons from this hunt, what do you carry with you for next year, next time?
I think doing your homework is important. Like I enjoy doing these on the fly hunts where you just show up to a new area and figure them out. But that said, it is difficult to do the level of scouting that I would like to do when you're there to hunt and when the woods are full of other hunters. So like in this situation and in other situations, like I'd really love to I don't know if I will be able to swing it again with a newborn and a toddler to take care of, but like I'd love to make off-season scouting trips to some of these areas to just learn that last 10% that I think will make the difference. So like whether it's more of the timber kind of hunting, like I was in some decent funnels, but is there a better funnel that a lot more deer are going to go through that is more shootable, to make sure that I'm actually going to be able to get a good shot opportunity at a buck if he comes through? Or the open country stuff, like are there places where I could get in a tree and have a good visual advantage from up in a tree, but then if the situation called for it, I could climb down and, you know, make a stalk. So it's just some of those things where I'd prefer to, like, if I'm going to take the time to invest and be away from my family, and not that, like, this is all just fun and games to us, right? The stakes really aren't that high. Like we're deer hunting, but like to us in the moment, like the stakes are super high. But just to make sure you're making the full investment, like unless you don't want that and you want to just hunt on the fly, like I think it's important to try to do as much scouting and homework and learning as possible. And if you can make a trip ahead of time, even so, like next year or this, I guess it'd be this year. Like if I'm still up in the air of as far as what I want to end up doing. But if I do go back and I'm unable to make a spring scouting trip, like maybe I'll make an early season trip and, try some different things, but also like do more scouting. So that way, when I come back in the rut, I have some of these things a little bit more figured out and a little more dialed. But those are kind of the thing. Again, I'm just trying to like figure out how to put myself in the best possible situation and just close. Like my cameraman Dylan, he's made a comment a few times. Like he thinks I'm one of the better people out there as far as getting on bucks. It's just like the killing them part that I haven't quite put together, because it seems like everywhere we go, like I'm getting on them, and whether it's a miss or whatever the case might be, like it's just getting an arrow in one it's hard. And if I can do some things in the off season or throughout the other parts of the year to just like close that gap just a little bit more, like I think the results will be a lot better.
So even though that you weren't able to kill on this trip, like of all the trips that you've had, like I said, I think that this is like probably one of the better videos that you have put out. Like, where does this rank on like the trips, like as far as like your favorite trips, like one way or the other?
I don't want to say it's number one or anything. It's top three for sure. Like I've had other hunts that I've killed on, but those hunts, like what I like on these trips is I want to feel like I'm building momentum. And what I mean by that is like I want to get a sighting or an encounter and then make an adjustment and feel like I'm in the game. Like I want to be having that chess game. And like I've killed on other trips where it's like, I might have an encounter here and there, but it's just like nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden you kill. And it's obviously like it's a sweet feeling and all of that, but there was no real build up to it. This one, it was like, again, every day with the exception of 1 or 2 days, like we were having encounters with bucks, and contrary to popular belief, it wasn't all at a mile away. Like we were getting them within bow range or close to them a lot of the time. And, like that was pretty special. So, definitely up there, saw a lot of bucks, shared it with a good friend. Other trips that I've been on that I've had, like people filming for me, a lot of times they're like more or less acquaintances or people I've never hunted with. And Dylan, he grew up in Traverse City with me. He was my crosstown rival. Like he was the star player of the other high school. So like we'd, have some pretty epic battles on the basketball court. So it's like somebody I knew. I was out there with a friend more or less. And that was also a cool aspect of it. But yeah, definitely top three for sure. If I killed, it would have definitely taken the cake.
They can't all be perfect, right?
Nope, not yet. And I will say, like the hunt didn't. There was a couple more days, and we got on bucks those days too. And the last, literally every encounter, every day after that, I think we had opportunities. But there was another day that we made a stalk and lost visual advantage. The buck ended up moving while we were making our approach, and still got, I don't know, it was probably 70 yards from him. And it was the big one from the first day we were glassing. He was big. And then the last day we rattled one in. I guess I did call one in, rattled one in, and he just came in right behind us where we had no back cover and busted us. So yeah, we definitely on deer and definitely had fun, but it does sting coming home empty handed after. I think it was one thing early on when I was like more, single guy and, I wasn't leaving a whole lot of stuff at home, but when I'm, putting my wife through what I'm putting her through by being away and she's got to handle things at the house by herself. It's nice. It makes it's a lot easier. It's not that she's ever upset if I don't kill something, but it's a lot better feeling coming home with a full cooler, knowing that like, all the work was worth it for you and for me. Yeah.
No, I can totally see that. One other thing before I let you go here, one of your other videos you used, you ended up using like a thermal drone service. That's kind of like one of these hot topic things where, should people use them? Should they be legal? Is it going to be like a problem? Like, you had the guy come, he found your deer, it was great. Having used one, like, what was your experience with it, and how do you kind of feel about it?
Yeah. I mean, so like feelings aside, I mean, it was super cool.
Right.
Like this dude rolled up and, he got that drone in the air, and I think he would have found that deer in about it wasn't a large area. And I'd already tracked him quite a while, lost blood, lost any travel direction. And like, if he was dead, he was going to be in this general area. But I mean, I think we found him in less than 2 minutes, and it would have been a lot quicker, but we stopped to look at a bobcat that was laying in the swamp, and we stopped and looked at a couple does and stuff like that. So super cool, like amazing tool. That said, so I mean, that was awesome. I do think I would have found that deer. Like if he was not available, I mean, I obviously could have went the dog route. And I think I would have found that deer if I just continued to grid search. But at I was losing daylight pretty quick. But anyways, all that to say, I don't think they belong in hunting. I think there's too much opportunity for abuse. And where I'm at in Ohio, I don't experience it much, although I did see one near my house one night when I got home. But I have a lot of friends, and usually it's the ones that are hunting the biggest deer that they are constantly having drones fly over them and having issues with specific people, like out-of-staters even, coming to fly over these certain areas, and then these giant bucks all of a sudden disappear off the grid, and no one knows what happens to them because they probably got poached or, something to that effect. I think there's just too much room for abuse. I think if they are going to be a thing, they have to be regulated much stricter. And I don't know how you could go about doing that would prevent people from saying, oh, I hit a doe back. Let's fly over my entire property so I can, that giant buck bedded right there. Now that I know where he's bedded, that's not the deer I killed. So keep looking. I think even if there was regulations around it, like, it's going to give people too much information, and cell cameras are already controversial. I use them. But I think knowing exactly where all of the deer are and where all the deer bed in real time is not a great thing for the sport.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I wanted to ask you, because you have experience using one for, like, quote unquote, like the intended purpose. But you also got to see, like, I guess, like, how powerful they are, like, while they're out there, like what they can also see. And so I think it's interesting to see that you had a good experience, but you also see that they're kind of dangerous. So I think it's good to hear from that perspective.
Real quick, I would venture to guess there's a lot of big name YouTuber industry people that have them for the wrong reasons. But if your whole career is built around killing good deer, like, would you be stupid to not have one and use it if that was your only goal and you didn't care how you went about doing that? I don't know. Like, there's a specific example that I'm thinking of where there's a video where they found a trespasser on the gun opener in Ohio, these two guys, because they were just flying over the property looking for trespassers, even though I'm fairly certain they were looking for a deer to go kill, because why else would you go drive around and fly a drone on opening morning versus going hunting? But anyway, I think the abuse is definitely happening already, and I hope it gets reeled in soon.
Yeah, I can see. I don't think we have much of that here in Michigan just yet. I haven't heard about it, but I'm also not chasing big bucks or have anything on my radar, so I'm not. They're not following me around, I guess is what I'm saying. But so again, congratulations. That video is awesome. It was a cool hunt, and it was, good to see you, even if it was in the zombie-like state. But super fun. And so where can people go watch that video and follow along with everything that you're doing?
Yep. YouTube, Next Step Outdoors is my channel. I'm also on Instagram. Those are the main platforms. But yeah, Next Step Outdoors, check out the video, leave a comment, let me know you came from the podcast. Always curious to hear where people are finding me. But that way I know that if you do leave a comment, you have the full context of the story, which would be kind of interesting to get your take after that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Yep. Thanks for having me, man.